Story 1. My mother never believed me the first time. Every statement was subject to questioning and investigation. By age 10, I knew I needed proof of anything and had to be ready for a big argument. I would rather believe my children and sometimes be lied to than undermine their sense of self-worth by never believing them. Story 2. I was made to sit at the dinner table for hours until I finished everything on my plate. As a child, I actually threw up from being so full. As an adult, I now overeat and feel guilt when I buy food or eat food someone else makes if I can't finish it. Story 3. Not telling them I love them and never saying sorry. I tell my children I love them every day. I express my appreciation for them, and I am fully willing to take responsibility for my mistakes. Story 4. Yelling at them over homework and dismissing their depression as not trying hard enough shows a lack of understanding. Not teaching them basic decency because I assume they are good kids can lead to negative consequences. If you don't teach them, the internet will. Story 5. Telling me to stop crying or I will give you something to cry about. I found out that this really affected my mind just a few days ago. Story 6. Being so absorbed in oneself that one forgets to genuinely parent neglects to recognize how their actions will shape this young child. Additionally, I would never put my child in a position where they have to be a caregiver to their actual parent. Story 7. No golden children. My kids will be treated equally, not as my brother and I have been treated. Story 8. Ensure they are afraid of me. I want my children to see me as a safe space and not feel emotionally responsible for my mood or physical well-being. Story 9. Being the mediator in their relationship, they would say, "We are staying together for the kids," but they wouldn't talk to each other. They would have me run around and communicate on their behalf. Story 10. My mom punished me with a wooden spoon so hard that it broke. I will never harm my child in that way. Story 11. I had a happy childhood and was loved and well cared for. However, I feel that my parents made no real effort to know me. They are so absorbed in their own lives. They love me, and I know that, especially my mom did her best. But it's still not a nice feeling. I make it a point to really get to know my kids. I try to be curious about what they like and think without trying to shape their feelings. I want them to feel loved, respected, and valued. That's quite different. Story 12. Always yelling for no reason. Spilling something results in being yelled at. Getting grass stains leads to being yelled at. There is no teaching on how to regulate emotions. There are no apologies for anything. Story 13. I want to have children, and I will take care of them and love them. I will not send them to their rooms when I have no one to show them to. I will not try to join any kind of group. Story 14. My mother never gave me one drop of confidence. All I heard was how I was no good at this or why I was even bothering to do that. Not a single word of encouragement my entire life. I remember calling her at work, telling her I signed up for the talent show at school. She responded with, "What talent?" I once told her I wanted to be on television one day, and she said, "The only way you'll ever be on television is if you sit on top of it." She always talked to me like a friend, so I just don't know if she meant those words or if they were just sarcastic. Either way, it hurt. Even to this day, I don't like telling people about my interests or that I'm starting something new. And heaven forbid if they ever see a project of mine or catch me in the middle of doing something, I might actually die. Anyway, I've never done that with my child. I don't tell her she's a special unicorn who can do anything just because she exists. But when she says she wants to do something, we work out the steps it takes to get there. I don't automatically tell her she's going to fail at it. Story 15. Dismiss my feelings. Don't be sad. Don't cry. Why are you crying again? There were so many moments like this when I was younger. Story 16. Two things come to mind. First, my mother always told me that she would love me no matter what and that I could come to her about anything. However, she hurled homophobic slurs at me when I told her I was bisexual and dating a male. I will never act that way. I want to say what I mean and mean what I say. Secondly, I was always told that when I was paying the bills, I could make the rules. This turned out not to be the case. Around the age of 22, I was paying for water, electricity, and rent, but I still wasn't allowed to come home later than 10 or 11 p.m. When I brought up the idea of paying the bills and making the rules, all I received in response was anger. So I walked out on them and never returned. I do not want my child to experience that with me. I will be very clear with my children that there will always be rules, and some of them we may not like. Story 17. I did something when I was 7 or 8 while on vacation. My dad said he would punish me for it when we got home. Nearly a week later, having never mentioned it again and having been good except for that incident, when we arrived home, he immediately took me for a walk out back and punished me. He said he would follow through because you have to stick to your word. I have no idea what I did to deserve the punishment, but I wasn't a troublemaker and was a real parent pleaser as a kid, so I can't imagine it was that bad. I have 2 children, and I have never hit either of them. When a punishment is needed, it's immediate and appropriate for the level of infraction. Waiting several days and punishing something trivial left emotional scars, and I never looked at him the same after that. Story 18. Public embarrassment. The belief that making me feel embarrassed in public will teach me to behave better. Story 19. As soon as my child could write, we would have him trace important information such as emergency numbers, home address, and a family phone number. He practiced this on a whiteboard every night after dinner, and by the age of 4, he could recite and write all of them independently. I lost my mother at a Canada Day festival when I was 5 and had nightmares throughout my childhood because of it. So even if your child cannot write yet, it is important to teach them these essential details. Story 20. Punishing or not believing children when they apologize is harmful. It is detrimental to teach children to apologize for disrespectful behavior or mistakes, only to tell them, "You're not really sorry, you're just upset about being punished," and sometimes impose further punishment. This experience has affected me deeply. I now struggle significantly to admit my mistakes and genuinely apologize for my wrongdoings. It feels almost impossible, as if my body and mind actively prevent me from doing so, which is quite troubling. Story 21. A self-absorbed father who showed little interest in his 4 children. He only paid attention when we made a mess, created noise, or got into trouble. I'm not that father. Story 22. Giving someone a car as a reward for a significant achievement, and then using that gift to exert control over their life decisions, especially as they transition into adulthood and seek their newfound freedom, is concerning. I am weary of parents attempting to dominate every aspect of their child's life, which can lead to unfavorable financial situations because it does not align with their own desires. Story 23. I wish my future children will be able to confide in me about things that I wished I could confide in my parents. Story 24. My mother constantly criticized my body and appearance. I developed a serious eating disorder by the time I was 11. She gave me medication to suppress my appetite, enrolled me in a weight loss program, and bought me a gym membership for Christmas. She would bring home pizza and soda for everyone at dinner but would throw it away before I could ever eat any. I had to weigh myself in front of her every day. I spent 12 days in a coma at age 23 due to malnutrition from my eating disorder. Now at 30 years old, I am still struggling. My mother has given me a lifelong battle. As a mother myself now, I could never imagine treating a child the way she did. Story 25. Acting like we owed them something for our existence. Don't get me wrong. I adore my parents and I owe them everything now. But when I was 6, I didn't understand and had no concept of gratitude. It just felt like I was in trouble for existing and needing to be taken care of. Story 26. They spent all their disposable income at bars. I cannot imagine how much it must have cost to go out 5 nights a week. They never took us on a single vacation, barely bought us new clothes, and never gave us gifts except for Christmas. I was envious of my friends who traveled, dressed fashionably, and had cool things like computers, stereos, all-terrain vehicles, and snowmobiles. I obsessed over things I couldn't have. With my son, we went on vacation every year. He had all-terrain vehicles, dirt bikes, and video game consoles. He wanted for nothing. Now he is a young adult, seems happy, and just doesn't care about material possessions. It's pretty cool. Story 27. Treating sex as if it were the worst thing possible and telling me that if I got someone pregnant, I would be kicked out of the family when I was 12 was damaging. Some basic discussions about safe sex and how to treat it with respect would have been very helpful. Story 28. Assuming that asking questions is talking back or shaming my child for using critical thinking against me is not productive. I do not want to get upset with them if they reach out for help. I want my child to question authority when it's important, but also to know when to listen. This understanding can only be developed through mutual respect and the acknowledgement that adults can be wrong, which is okay. However, if there is a safety concern, they need to know who to call and that help will be there, regardless of the situation they might find themselves in. Story 29. I do not have kids of my own, but I nanny for my friends. I decided the best approach was to remember what my father would do and do the opposite. Some of these guidelines include allowing the child free access to healthy snacks and never shaming them for eating. Never hit or insult the child under any circumstances. Always explain why they can't do something instead of just saying, "because I said so." Always apologize sincerely when wrong instead of just doubling down. Respect that they are human beings who are intelligent. Do not belittle, talk down to, or call them stupid. Allow them to cry and express their emotions instead of intimidating them into silence. Discipline with compassion and understanding, never with revenge or anger in your heart. So far, sticking to these rules has made me the favorite babysitter. Story 30. I was treated inappropriately by a cousin and my brothers, and every time I told my mom, she just said to ignore it. I would rather die than ever say those words to my stepchildren. If anyone is inappropriate with them, they will face the full force of 30 years of pent-up anger. It took me a long time to realize that what my mom really meant was that she wanted to ignore the situation so I should, too. I dealt with the damage, and now I'm doing much better. I have no contact with my brothers and cousin, and I had a heartfelt conversation with my mom where she apologized, and we have rebuilt our relationship over time. But I will never sideline a problem my stepchildren are facing. They will never be told to ignore it. Story 31. Forcing my child to finish their plate was something I experienced as an obese child and adult. I am still trying to unlearn this behavior. Story 32. Focus on how healthy things are, how much sugar is in everything, and how people are judged based on their weight. Both of my siblings and I have issues with food, exercise, and weight because of this. Story 33. I want to be the kind of father my children can approach with their problems and discuss their lives. I do not want to hide my emotions from them. Story 34. Indoctrinating my children into a religion should be entirely their own choice as adults. My children are grown, and they have both thanked me for that. Story 35. Truly, honestly, having children is a significant responsibility. Many people may not be suited to be parents, but that is not the core issue. This world is currently not an ideal environment for children, nor is it likely to become one in the near future. Story 36. 1. I struggled with my body image, influenced by my mother's comments about her own appearance. I often directed my anger towards others, having grown up with emotional outbursts that I believed were my fault. I will ensure my child feels heard. As a child, I experienced invalidation from my parents, who would respond to my feelings with phrases like, "Pull your socks up." I remember them finding me hiding bowls of socks during my battle with an eating disorder, and they claimed I was just trying to be fashionable. That was 20 years ago, and I still deal with the effects of the eating disorder. I will teach them about managing money, bills, finances, and essential life skills. Story 37. I love my kids, and I tell them often. I apologize if I hurt them, whether physically or emotionally, and take accountability for my actions by saying, "I'm sorry I hurt you." Then, I take steps to ensure it doesn't happen again. I do not use physical discipline. I am honest with them and explain things clearly so they can understand. Story 38. Fat shaming. My parents shamed me about my weight, leading to an eating disorder and a terrible relationship with food. I am still overweight, so their attempts were ineffective. Story 39. Refusing to admit mistakes my dad would never acknowledge when he was wrong. He held me to a stricter set of standards than my twin sister. He also treated my older brother differently, giving him more freedoms. Additionally, I was forced to take my sister with me whenever I wanted to go out. Since we didn't get along, this made me reluctant to go out. The constant pressure to be together often led to more conflicts between us. Story 40. Parentification and lack of stability were significant challenges. I moved 6 to 8 times between the ages of 10 and 18. For a couple of years, I slept on an air mattress. I also slept on a stranger's couch as a roommate and spent about 6 months on the floor in a pile of blankets. I lived out of a box of my belongings and dealt with utilities being shut off multiple times. There were occasions when I had to fetch a bucket of water from the creek to bathe. I witnessed my stepfather overdose in front of me and have a mental breakdown. My mother went through a phase of substance dependence for a few months, and the family decided I needed to look after her and help her since I was the only one living with her at the time. I also spent 6 to 9 months living with my brother, his wife, and their 3 children while my mother and her husband went to North Carolina. Due to my mother's lack of trust in my brother's budgeting skills, I was responsible for shopping for 6 people with the weekly allowance, traveling by bus to Walmart at the age of 15. I often woke up every night to care for their baby, as they would allow him to cry nonstop all night while I needed to wake up for school at 6 a.m. Out of all this, the only grudge I have is regarding our move back to my hometown during my junior year. I was promised I would graduate there after reconnecting with my old friends. 2 months into my senior year, I was told we were moving again. I screamed, cried, and begged on my knees. All I wanted was to graduate with my friends. I even secured a job and arranged for an apartment, with my dad agreeing to sign the lease since I was a minor. Then my mother told me, "If you stay, I stay. You'll be the reason I get divorced." I ended up going with her. This turned into a rant, so I apologize. However, around the 3rd or 4th move, I vowed never to prioritize my own desires or a relationship over the stability and happiness of my child's life. My child will have a proper childhood. I am child-free by choice now, but if I ever do have children, I will ensure they have that experience. Story 41. I don't want my child to feel responsible for my happiness. It is something I actively work on. Since having a child, I am also trying to unlearn the unrealistic expectations of always being extremely well-behaved, as a child will and should act like a child. Story 42. Telling my child that they are being manipulative or that they are a manipulative person concerns me. My mother accused me of this frequently when I was young. As a mother myself, I now realize that most young children cannot manipulate people into doing things they do not want to do. I think she attributed negative outcomes to my supposed manipulation of her poor decisions. This made me believe I was a selfish and bad person for a long time, but I now know that I am not. Additionally, my mother and father labeled me in a non-negotiable way as not sensitive and tough, because I did not express much emotion during difficult situations. I would retreat into my own thoughts, but they did not see that. This led me to believe I was not a caring person until I later realized that I am likely hypersensitive and have just learned to process emotions internally, probably to avoid commentary on my reactions. Story 43. Forcing me to finish my plate has resulted in a binge eating issue for me, as well as for my mother, who was also pressured to finish her food. It is unclear why she repeated this behavior. Story 44. Giving away animals or a family pet without discussing it first can be hurtful. My dad did this to me with my rabbit when we moved to the city, saying there was no room for him, even though we had a large backyard. Story 45. My girlfriend's mother reportedly said, "I love you, but right now I don't like you," whenever my girlfriend misbehaved as a child. I'm not sure what it is about that, but it really bothers me. Story 46. Punishing me harshly when I made a mistake as a kindergarten child. I would never hurt my children. Nonetheless, they tried their best. Story 47. Not respecting my privacy or personal boundaries was a significant issue. My adoptive mother would go through my diary and confront me about the things I wrote, effectively taking away my only safe space to express my feelings and thoughts. She would barge into the bathroom while I was trying to use it and get upset with me for locking the door to keep her out. She had an inappropriate attitude towards me. This is one of the reasons I have no contact with her today. Story 48. telling me that whenever someone hurts me, it is somehow my fault. I need to take care of it myself and learn how to behave. Anyone who harms my child will face consequences. Story 49. Forcing them to clean their plates during mealtimes taught me a lesson I won't repeat. I have weight problems, but my sons do not and know when to stop eating, even if there is still food on their plates. Story 50. Moving from a city I loved to a place I disliked, far from my extended family, friends, school, and activities was challenging. I would never uproot my child in such a selfish manner. Story 51. Not making them brush their teeth or shower takes years to build proper hygiene habits. Not looking after their hair causes knots that often require cutting. Not washing their clothes or bed linen results in children going to school in dirty-smelling clothes. Not enforcing homework leads to a lack of discipline and care. Story 52. Yelling at my kids over bad grades. By yelling, I mean screaming until I turn red in the face and am hysterically crying. So I definitely won't be doing that. Story 53. Not encouraging or pressuring children to continue when things become difficult is important. My parents were very supportive and, fortunately, had enough financial resources for me to explore many activities I wanted to pursue while growing up. They never compelled me to stick with anything. While it is not their fault, I struggle with self-discipline and have come to understand that, from a nurturing perspective, this may be due to rarely being required to persist when faced with challenges. I recognize that there is a fine line, as many people tend to apply too much pressure on their children, but I was definitely on the opposite end of that spectrum. Story 54. Being emotionally unavailable or distant when I needed to be present made me feel like I was not a priority. Sometimes, I think my parents were overwhelmed or preoccupied with their own issues. As a parent, I want to ensure my children always feel heard, seen, and supported, no matter how busy life gets. Story 55. Using children as a way to get back at your ex-husband is not appropriate. Children are not currency, and having them on a certain weekend is not a prize. Treat them as individuals. Story 56. 1. Having children. 2. Leaving my child with the other parent because I want to go out on Friday and Saturday nights. Story 57. Raising children with a partner I actively dislike is challenging. My parents fought frequently throughout my childhood, creating a hostile environment. I took great care in choosing who to have children with because it was crucial to me that my children not grow up with parents who appeared to hate each other. While I may inherit something because they stuck it out for the kids, I would have much preferred a happy home during my upbringing. The difficulties of my childhood stemmed from two people who should not have been together forcing themselves into each other's lives. Story 58. When my kids say something like, "I'll talk about it when I'm ready," I respect that and do not judge them for it because I understand it can be painful to admit. I won't discuss weight, but I will make healthier choices if necessary and may implement family walks to subtly encourage exercise. Education is important, but I will expect decent grades. I will not call them names, no matter how frustrated I am, because respect goes both ways. If you call your child a name, they will return the favor. I do not mind cursing as long as it is not directed at someone and is not in an inappropriate setting. It is acceptable to say "damn" if you cut your finger at home, but not when you make a mistake at school. They will have chores, but I will not make them do them if they are having a bad day. It may sound silly, but sometimes kids just need to relax. Devices will be allowed, but I am not raising iPad kids. Television will be limited to Friday nights or long car journeys. When they get phones at around 11 or 12, they can use them except at night, depending on the child. Sports will be important, and they will all participate in athletics from a young age to give them an advantage. If they want to pursue a professional career in sports, it will be highly encouraged, and I will coach teams and carpool. I do not care what clothes they choose within reason. I buy what I ask for but do not ask for much. I spent €200 at Christmas on 5 jerseys. They last for years and I wear them every day. I will never hit my kids or abuse them in any way. I may jokingly threaten to give a smack, but I will not raise my hand to them, as this causes issues I am still working through today. My kids will see affection between their parents. Not anything inappropriate, but some kisses, hugging, and hand-holding. I never saw my parents do this, so it makes me uncomfortable when I do see it, which is rare. My kids will participate in boxing, taekwondo, or something similar for self-defense. Especially my daughters, who will be taught everything about staying safe and how to protect themselves. Story 59. I cried in front of my mom because she made her emotions my responsibility. I was constantly having to regulate her feelings or soothe her in some way. Story 60. Bullying children because I am having a bad day. Making jokes at their expense to feel better. Yelling at them before bed or before school and expecting them to have a good day and perform well in school. Story 61. Growing up, I was always told no without any explanation. Just no. Full stop. And I was expected to obey. With my future children, I want to do things differently. I will explain why it is a no so they understand the reason behind it. I do not want to just shut them down, leaving them confused and hurt. Instead, I want to help them learn. Story 62. I used to struggle with my math homework, and my parents didn't understand it any more than I did. So I had nobody to ask for help. Now that I'm solid in math up to basic calculus, my son will not face that problem. My parents never showed interest in my hobbies. Even when I was a teenager, I tried hard to share my world with them, but they only talked about college sports and their failed business. Today, my son teaches me so much about Minecraft, and I truly appreciate it. Story 63. Having 45 photo albums for the first child, while subsequent children have only a few, can create feelings of inadequacy. It's understandable that everything was new with the first child, leading to extensive documentation. However, later children may feel overlooked when they see that only a few moments of their lives were captured. Story 64. There is a significant difference between a gentle swat on a diapered bottom and a belt on a bare one. Story 65. My parents were quick to use corporal punishment and often said, "Do as I say because I'm the parent." I took a completely different approach with my son. I never spanked him, but we did have our share of roughhousing over the years. If he did something wrong, instead of screaming at him, we talked about it, and I explained why he shouldn't do that again. I also listened sincerely to his side so I could make better decisions. I raised a child and gained a best friend. He always knew I had his back. Story 66. Sharing everything she thought was cute with everyone she knows. No one else needs to know what I thought my first period would be like, Mom. Story 67. Forcing individuals into conventional social interactions, making them participate when they do not want to, can be challenging. I was diagnosed late with autism and attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder. My daughter is very much like I was. She will ignore a close friend in a different location and gets upset if compelled to interact. I understand this and support her wishes. We used to cross the road and change our route rather than engage with someone in a costume or mascot. In contrast, I often felt pressured to get on with it or participate. It is never rude to opt out of such situations, just as it is not necessary to hug all relatives for greetings or farewells. Story 68. My parents made threats of punishment but never followed through. I was much more consistent, and if I warned my children of a consequence, I followed through. I also did not threaten consequences that would be unrealistic to implement. Story 69. After their divorce, my mom would speak negatively about my dad. She would criticize him whenever she had a chance and never missed an opportunity to bring up something bad that had happened during their 13 years together. I hated it. I have a lifelong friend who experienced a similar situation growing up. While I was going through my divorce, I spent time with him, and he mentioned that he always respected his father for never speaking ill of his mother. We exchanged stories about our mothers, and both of us agreed that our fathers made the right decision to leave those marriages. I have bitten my tongue many times over the last several years, but I do not disparage my ex-wife in front of my children. I have agreed with my teenagers when they complain about her being unreasonable or unfair, but that is as far as I go. It's really hard sometimes, especially when the kids tell me about some of the things she says about me, but I refuse to do it. Story 70. Forcing a child to study a particular subject for a desired career instead of allowing them to choose their own path is not beneficial. Story 71. My mother was always high-strung and had a quick temper. She would sometimes reach the point of slapping me. This happened maybe 2 to 3 times a year, always with an open hand on my arm or thigh. This was not an old-fashioned spanking, where I was laid over a lap and slapped on the rear. This was her anger reaching a breaking point and lashing out at me. She would be seeing red, and I remember feeling terrified. I include all these details because sometimes when I've opened up about this to friends, they are dismissive of how traumatic I found it because it wasn't all the time. No one was punching me or leaving bruises, and some kids have it worse. Well, it was hurtful. I've never had a good relationship with my mother because of it, and it never succeeded in correcting any poor behavior my mother was trying to address. There is nothing good to come from physically punishing your own children like that. Story 72. Being too busy to answer questions or help is frustrating. I absolutely disliked being told not now or to ask the other parent who was also busy. I may have done things my son didn't appreciate, but that was not one of them. Story 73. I dislike how every corner of the platform is full of child-free antics. Having children is an insincere response since it is not about parenting. Come on. As for me, I do not scold over clumsiness, such as accidentally dropping a plate. I hated being punished for my hands being too small. Story 74. Refusing to respect their child's boundaries and then failing to acknowledge this lack of respect. Story 75. My parents never told me they loved me, and they didn't act like they did either. Unsurprisingly, I'm pretty sure they didn't love me. Nothing they say now, as I am a successful adult with a high income, can convince me otherwise. My daughter knows I love her more than anything. Story 76. I was raised in a country where it is common to have domestic help. We had someone who assisted my mother with housework since she worked and was often not home. I did not contribute to household tasks because that kind person handled everything. As a result, I grew up without the habit of cleaning, washing, or managing household responsibilities. Although I manage these tasks now, it was challenging to adapt. Story 77. My dad is currently allowing his wife to disrespect me and his mother without defending us at all. I would never do that if I had children. Abandoning my children and never speaking to them again, like my mom, is just wrong. Story 78. My parents were very strict with me. At one point, I was afraid of my dad. I couldn't experience childhood fully. Everything had to be done by the book and to their standards. This was their version of tough love. But I will show my children nothing but unconditional love and allow them to be kids. Story 79. Trying to improve my emotional state when I'm upset is not always effective. I believe it's important to acknowledge my feelings and develop coping skills instead. Story 80. Setting them up to compete with each other for my attention, resources, or positive regard. We have a running joke about being the favorite daughter, but it is entirely a joke. Story 81. Never apologizing when in the wrong. My mom used to shame me whenever I was sad or angry, saying I don't get to feel that way since I have no real responsibilities. Story 82. Giving us the belt as a punishment. The defining aspect of humanity is the ability to reason. Talk to your children. You are not a monkey. Story 83. My parents wanted to completely control the person they raised. My advice: children are individuals from the day they are born. Give them appropriate personal autonomy based on their age and maturity, but allow them to be themselves, as long as they are not harming themselves or others. Set appropriate goals and choose your battles. Do not argue over trivial matters such as the length or color of their hair, their desire to be a Lego master, or their dislike of cauliflower. Opt for guidance instead of strict rules. Engage in meaningful conversations with them from the moment they are able. Story 84. Making me feel like a burden. I come home with bruises and am told not to ruin my mom's relationship with the other kids. This creates a situation of toxic empathy. Story 85. Blaming one child for all of the family's problems is not constructive. If a child throws a tantrum or talks back and punishment does not work, try calmly addressing the issue instead of resorting to isolation. Story 86. Treating them as an inconvenience when they were sick. Telling them they would get a shot if they went to the doctor because she didn't want to take them. Mom ignored our illnesses as much as she could. Story 87. Demonstrating love through hugs and expressing affection is a wonderful feeling. I tell my children every time we talk that I love them. I do not recall my parents ever expressing that to me. Story 88. Not being nurturing and treating me like an adult, even as a young child, had a lasting impact on me. I remember being 5 years old and crying my eyes out after my aunt passed away. Instead of comforting me, my parents locked themselves in separate rooms for days because they didn't want to deal with it. This experience transformed me into a very angry adult. Story 89. I will never leave them and travel the world while making significant money with a nursing job, while they struggle to get by with their father on assistance and receiving clothes from the church. They ride their bikes everywhere because gas is too expensive, while I drive around in a convertible Mustang. I then try to make up for my absence by spending a lot on them during Christmas. Story 90. Putting the views, comfort, and egos of other family members before my children leads them to feel like second-class citizens who have less claim and importance than others. I am overly critical and judgmental, holding my children to standards I have never achieved. I treat my children like stand-in therapists. Am I salty? You bet I am. Story 91. Using them as a weapon, beating them, berating them, ignoring their needs to get high and party, invalidating their fears and feelings, blaming them for anything that goes wrong in my life, locking them out of the house to sleep on the street because of a curfew, calling them stupid, calling them worthless, leaving them to go hungry while I eat at fancy restaurants, drinking excessively in their presence, threatening to harm them or their other parent, withholding love or support at the smallest inconvenience. All of the abuse. Story 92. Ripping loose teeth out of their mouths at the first little wiggle. I bled when my dad found out I had my first loose tooth. He discovered the rest when they showed up on the kitchen counter. Story 93. Overprotective. I'm 30, and my mom still has issues with me wanting to go through difficult times alone. She has affected several of my relationships because she inserts herself into them, even after I've told her multiple times not to do so. It's frustrating, and as a result, I don't even date anymore because I'm concerned about how she will interact with my partners. Story 94. Forcing me to attend an online college, even though they had good intentions, meant I stayed at home all day, and it was quite boring. Story 95. My mother didn't teach me how to do laundry, dishes, cooking, budgeting, or taxes. I made my kids start doing their own laundry at age 10, and at age 15, I began teaching them how to budget. Doing dishes was one of their chores as they grew up. I always had them help me cook so they could learn and spend time with their dad. They still have questions as adults, but I felt they had the basics down when they left the house. Story 96. Mental and physical abuse is a difficult story to share. I grew up in a challenging environment, but I recognize that my situation is better than that of many others. Maintaining perspective keeps me going. Story 97. Kicking them with a steel-toed boot after throwing them on their knees, among other aggressive acts, occurred after something as simple as threatening to call my grandmother following my dad's emotional outburst. I think I was around 7 or 8 years old. I sought anger management when I realized I was beginning to exhibit similar anger issues. I refused to be abusive. Story 98. Never harass them about their appearance, especially regarding weight. Do not devalue their struggles simply because they may not seem significant enough to complain about. They are allowed to express their frustrations. Story 99. Provide no emotional support. Criticize and ignore any part of me that was not approved or liked. This has left me feeling like a shell of a human being until I no longer had to live with her. Story 100. Hitting them, giving the silent treatment, not listening to their feelings, making fun of their appearance, ignoring them, and not feeding him are all harmful actions. My son knows I love him without a doubt, and I express this every day, multiple times. Story 101. Trying to shape me into the person she wanted me to be, while trying to suppress parts of me she did not like. Story 102. Always thinking they are right or know more because they have life experience. I believe everything I know could be deemed incorrect if they have a different perspective. I want to be open-minded and recognize that sometimes others actually know more than I do about a specific subject. Story 103. The apologies feel like a guilt trip. My mom would say, "Sorry, I'm such a horrible mother to you." But that's not an apology, and I'm not falling for it. You are truly hurtful. Story 104. My parents enjoyed manipulating me long before there was a term for it. There were constant mind games, and it was a struggle not to repeat those patterns with my children when they made me angry because it was all I knew. I know I made mistakes sometimes, but I recognized them and always held myself accountable for my actions. They are adults now, which is why I speak about it in the past tense, and now we are close. I, on the other hand, dread talking to my mother because the conversations always revolve around her, and there's often some form of manipulation involved. Story 105. Parents failed in such a significant way that I chose not to have children. I would not have known how to raise them properly. Story 106. Being spanked was something I hated. I vowed never to raise my kids the same way, and I succeeded. Hitting a child is never acceptable. Story 107. Ignoring blatant signs of neurodiversity for reasons I still cannot understand. My best guess is that they simply do not believe ADHD is a real condition. Story 108. Speaking negatively about close relatives and attempting to turn us against them when she was the problem. Story 109. My parents had children but had little interest in raising them. My daughter is 20 now, and I did my best to help her grow into the best adult she could be. But I am sure I affected her in new and interesting ways. We all do. Story 110. First, I want to say that for the most part, my parents were good. That being said, speaking negatively about the other parent after a divorce is harmful. Children have a right to love and have relationships with both parents. My ex did the opposite and told my kids all kinds of lies. My older son experienced a lot of anger and bitterness during his teenage years. However, as they grew older, they learned the truth about their dad on their own. Additionally, I never took my kids to a movie that was inappropriate for them because I wanted to see it, but couldn't find a babysitter. I have never recovered from seeing Jaws as a child. It completely traumatized me. Story 111. Tell them that they don't need to feel sad or angry because I provide them with food and other necessities. If my child feels sad, I listen to them and support them. Story 112. Pushing their financial issues onto me. I could understand if I was the cause of their financial concern, but struggling to pay bills because they just bought a new all-terrain vehicle is not the concern of a child in middle school. Story 113. I will raise my child without religion. If we cannot teach a child the difference between right and wrong without it, then we have failed not only as parents but as human beings. Story 114. My parents had the conversation about when I felt ready for sex. I told them when I was ready, but they didn't approve. I was immediately grounded, and the topic was never discussed again. Story 115. Having children can be complex. My mother had me with the expectation of having a mini-me who would love her unconditionally. However, that did not go as planned, so she had my sister. Now she has one child who wants nothing to do with her and another who has little to do with her. But then you wouldn't exist. Don't tempt me with a good time. Story 116. My dad would get angry for no reason, just walk out of the house, and not return for hours. We all dreaded when he would return and give us the silent treatment. I also get angry for no good reason, but I recognize it and physically tell myself to calm down, eat a small snack, and hide out for a couple of minutes in the basement stairwell until I feel my heart slow down. It's like an unexplainable snap out of nowhere. I know his parent experienced this as well. It's strange. Story 117. Comparing siblings to one another damages their relationship and can lead to self-esteem issues. Story 118. Fighting and giving the silent treatment in front of the kids without addressing it has made it difficult for me to learn how to disagree, argue, or express discontent without fearing that they will leave me or hate me and never talk to me again. Story 119. My parents never taught me anything about being independent. They believed I could stay with them as long as they could support me because I didn't know anything. I am now nearly 20 years old and practically scared of everything, struggling with crippling social anxiety, because my parents never allowed me to make any mistakes or take any risks. I didn't take a shower alone until I was 12, and that was only after begging them for months. I couldn't pick out my own clothes, and my parents constantly asked if I remembered to go to the toilet or brush my teeth, even as a teenager. They also allowed me to shower only once a week, believing that anything more was wasting water. They didn't teach me any hygiene tips at all. Overall, they made significant mistakes in raising me, and I am determined to teach my future children to be their own advocates, to be brave, to make mistakes, and most importantly, to be independent so they get the best head start in life. Story 120. Using fear tactics, my mom kept me away from roads by saying that people do not like children and would try to run me over with their cars. She wonders why I grew up with severe social anxiety. Story 121. Hating her body out loud, saying she looked disgusting in the mirror, refusing to see old friends because she had gained weight and was afraid of their reaction. She never made us feel this way about our bodies. She was always supportive of us at any weight. However, her clear hatred for her own body affected us, and now we all struggle. I will never get over my body issues, but I am determined to never let my daughters see them. When they tell me I'm soft and squishy, I express how much I love being soft and squishy for them. I dress in clothing that accentuates my curves and show them confidence. I try not to let them notice my obsessive dieting, but instead focus on providing them with balanced meals and explaining nutrition in child-friendly ways. Story 122. My parents were both alcoholics and had 6 children. As the oldest, I ended up doing a lot of caretaking and felt forgotten about in terms of my needs. My husband and I have both been sober for 6 years. Even though we have moments when we are not great parents, we try every day to meet the needs of our 3 children and to be what they need. We always strive to be better parents. Our kids know they are loved and cherished. Story 123. I will never shame my son for touching himself in the privacy of his bedroom. I will never deny him a goodnight hug, speak of it again, or refuse to apologize. I was maybe 6. It was awful. My son is only 4, but he will be raised differently regarding his body, sexuality, and consent. Story 124. Being reassuring. Explaining anything instead of just saying not to worry. Giving affection like hugs and kisses daily. Saying I love you every day. Letting them express their feelings openly without interruption. Encouraging them to smile brightly in pictures. Story 125. Taking mental health issues seriously. For the first 27 years of my life, I lived in constant severe depression, believing that my normal was constantly wishing to harm myself. When I finally saw a psychologist, they prescribed medication that actually worked. Now, I believe I am discovering my true normal for the first time. Story 126. 1. Being used as a stand-in partner. Not advocating for oneself or for one's children. Teach your children what boundaries are. If you are not coping as a parent, your children are likely not doing well either. Consider seeking professional help for them. Story 127. Leave the car running without you inside it. I didn't know the car could move forward without pressing the pedal when I put it into gear while Dad chased it down. Story 128. Not allowing me to feel anger or frustration has affected my ability to communicate negative feelings with my parents and partners. Although I have a much better relationship with my parents as an adult, their refusal to let me express these emotions as a child has had lasting consequences. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.